And then I heard about Reverend Odom here at the Newton Baptist Church in Newton, and I went to him and talked to him about getting some help to help me repair the house. And he told me he would help me as best he could, and this is the result of the conversation with him. He has really given me a lot of help through organizations like the Salvation Army, and all these volunteers have just been great. They're wonderful.
This wasn't the first renovation project for many of the volunteers who came from Newton, other parts of Georgia, South Carolina, and Connecticut. Some of them are novices in construction work, others are professionals. The four Perret brothers, jokingly called the Mario Brothers, are professional drywall installers.
You're going to help your neighbor out, you know. People are in need, and volunteer service, it makes you feel better.
I got into this program by thinking that the contractors, the professionals, could help do this a little bit better. We're doing this every day for a living, and why not use the skills that we know to help these folks? And if we can get people back into their houses and make them warm, safe, and dry, we know that they then can go around and help someone else.
I see now that volunteer help's needed more, not just in this area, but everywhere. When Hurricane Andrew hit Florida, well, you know, it wasn't all that far for us. We didn't go, but I believe next time I'll go.
Like I say, I look at people differently now. You know, I won't just see bad, you know, or fear, and I respect all that. And me, myself, you know, I would like to help too. You know, I would have to go out and help somebody else, you know, like they came in to help me, you know, because it means so much. You just can't imagine how much it means.
These homeowners say it's hard to find the words to express their gratitude to the volunteers, but you can see the emotion in their eyes.
But you can't thank them enough. You can't say enough, you know. You really can't say enough. And you feel so, it's deep, you know, your feelings are so deep for these people, you know. You just can't describe it.
Sailboats, shrimp boats, and an occasional commercial vessel grace these waters off Georgia's coast. Their passengers and cargo differ greatly from that of the ships that carried Africans to be bought and sold as slaves. Most descendants of slave owners can trace their family roots from Europe to the New World. That task isn't as easy for descendants of families that were brought from Africa, sold into lives of servitude, and more times than not, separated from their relatives as slave owners stake their claim. Most descendants of slaves sold on the mainland may never have benefit of knowing where or how their ancestors lived in Africa. But Frankie and Doug Quimby of St. Simon's Island can look back to those days with more than speculation of what life was like for their ancestors. Frankie, you're fortunate to have knowledge of something that most African Americans don't, and that's knowing where your roots lie in Africa.
Yes, our ancestors were from West Africa, and they were from the town of Guyana, in the district of Tamora and the kingdom of Messina, and they were from the Fula tribe, which was on the Niger River, and that area today is called Nigeria.
Okay. What was your great-grandfather's name there? Wasn't he a prince?
My great-grandfather's name was Sala Balala, and they gave him, he was an African prince when he was brought over here, and they gave him the American name Old Tom, so that they didn't want them to use their native names or language when they brought our people here. So they gave him on the plantation the name Old Tom, and he was overseeing the plantation when the slave owners had to leave the plantation on the islands and go to the mainland because of mosquito bites.
Malaria was common among the white slave owners, but didn't seem to affect the slaves, so plantation holders used the labor of Africans to help make cotton king. Magnificent cotton fields like the ones on St. Simon's Retreat Plantation were common on the Golden Isles. Ruins of the slave hospital and the original house built on the plantation in the 1700s are still standing. And more than 200 years ago, slaves planted these sprawling oaks that lined the drive leading up to what was called the Big House. By the mid-1700s, rice replaced cotton as the region's most bountiful crop, and what is now known as Hoffel Broadfield Plantation emerged as a powerful economic force in what was called the Rice Society. This plantation house has been modified since it was built in the 1850s, and the quarters for the house servant stand as an example of the duplex design common to most slave quarters. It took hundreds of African slaves to clear the jungle-like swamp that this freshwater marsh once was. The slaves constructed miles of ditches and dikes by hand to create rice fields on the plantation. After the rice was planted and cultivated, it went through several steps of processing by hand. The slaves called it rice beating. Many traditions like rice beating grew out of the back-breaking conditions that slaves lived under. The Quimbies have tried to keep those traditions alive. They traveled throughout the United States as the Georgia Sea Island Singers, performing slave songs, games, and dances. Tell me about some of the slave traditions. Let's start with ham bone. Can you demonstrate what that is?
Oh yes, ham bone is a very good game that the slaves made up because of the way they were being treated with the ham bone. Slave owners had the slave to kill hogs. They wouldn't give them any of the good parts of the meat. They would only give them the head, the ears, the tail, the feet, and the chitlins. And if one was real good on the plantation, then after they got through getting all the meat off the ham bone, they would give the bone to him as a treat. But their love for each other, they would take that ham bone, cut it up, and share it from shack to shack all around that plantation, helping each other to survive. So that's why that famous line is, ham bone, where you been, all around the world and back again, meaning that that ham bone hadn't been anywhere but around that plantation, helping each other to survive. You gave it to me, but I shared it with my friends and relatives all around the plantation. You want to see some of it?
Yeah.
Okay, the original verse is, ham bone, pat him on the shoulder. Hand me down a pretty girl, show you how to hold her. Santa Claus was a good old man. He washed his face in the frying pan. Ham bone, where you been? All around the world and back again. And that's the basis of ham bone.
Songs and children's games played an important role in the slaves' very survival. They were often performed in the Gullah language that the slave owners and overseers could not understand.
The Gullah language is a mixture of the African dialect and English that came out different. As I said before, they didn't want them to use their native language because the slave owners wanted to know what they were saying at all times. So they were smart enough to disguise it and talk in codes, even using English.
Where you use the word break, they use the word broke. Where you use the word broke, they use the word break. Where you use the word leave, they use the word left. Where you use the word left, they use the word leave. Now where you will say, I'm going to break this, they will say, I ain't going to break them. And where you will say, I'm going to leave here, they will say, that's where to go, they're going to live you.
One of the songs to me that's very dear to me, it's Raggy Levy. When the men would go out to work on the ships, like down to Amelia Island in Florida, or maybe to Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, it would take those ships a long time to go back and forth. And when those men would leave home, they would leave their families raggedy. When they would get back, they would be raggedy. They couldn't say to the slave owners, we want clothing for our family.
And they would say, Raggy Levy, oh boy, ain't she raggy as a jaybird. And then the Gullah language said, Raggy Levy, oh boy, ain't she raggy as a jaybird. And so it went like this. Raggy Levy, ho, ho, do Raggy Levy. Hey, Raggy Levy, oh boy, ain't she ragged as a jaybird. I made a Cipollina, I'm going to build me a stone fence.
When white plantation residents would head for the mainland during the summer months to avoid contracting malaria, slaves openly practiced their culture. The Gullah language and other traditions survived and were taught and passed down to people like Frankie and Doug. As the years go by, preserving the Gullah heritage gets tougher, but Frankie and Doug Quimby are committed to educating the public about their culture and to passing it down from generation to generation.
Don't worry about it.
For the past 16 years, Frankie and Doug have organized the Georgia Sea Island Festival, a celebration of African American traditions that developed out of the slave era. This year, they're leaving the nuts and bolts of preparation to their children. Frankie's son Joseph is in charge of the festival grounds.
Everybody have to chip in and help each other out. I mean, just